Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Susan Zeiderveen. I'm the prosecuting attorney for Van Buren County. I thank you all for being here, and I especially thank law enforcement in the school system for being behind me and supporting me as well. First of all, I want to say our hearts go out to the victims. This was a tragedy that we feel could and should have been prevented. Our goal must be to make sure this doesn't happen again in our community. As most of you know, I prosecuted Aiden Ingalls in 2018 for attempting to use explosives and firearms at the Pawpaw High School. He had a backpack with a sawed-off shotgun and explosives ready to use first thing Monday morning as students were entering the school. He made extensive plans of how to spare his own family, plans that included setting the clocks back in his home, hiding his mother's keys, just so his sisters could be spared. A search warrant was executed and a detailed journal was located in the suspect's room. The journal described in great detail how the suspect intended on carrying out mass killings at the high school. It also included a hit list and details of how he mutilated and killed animals. He talked about blowing up the school when he turned 21 and shooting up the beach at South Haven for the 4th of July fireworks. He wanted to injure large numbers of people in all of the descriptions he provided. He decided to carry out his violence and terrorism in 2018 because people were starting to question him, and he knew he needed to act quicker than he had originally planned. Law enforcement and the prosecutor's office recognized the extreme public safety threat and made the decision to try to prosecute him as an adult. This would have protected the public for a longer period of time and allowed the court to have jurisdiction for extended services and surveillance. Testimony was taken over 2 days, and his journal was read page by page into the record for the court to consider. Over 200 years of law enforcement experience, much as we have here today, attended the hearing where the judge read his opinion. Chiefs of local agencies, Michigan State Police, and the Sheriff's Office all stood in support for the community. Unfortunately, this was not enough. And on August 20th, our fears came to fruition. There are 6 factors that a court must consider when making a decision on whether the juvenile should have been charged as an adult. Michigan court rules state the court must give greater weight to the seriousness of the alleged offense in the juvenile's prior delinquency record. As prosecutor, I argued the public safety risk was too great and the alleged offense too heinous to allow a juvenile sentence. The judge disagreed and placed the greatest weight on the lesser factors, focusing on what was in the best interest of the juvenile. Aiden Ingalls was placed on probation and placed in a juvenile detention facility for a period of time. He was released on November 4th, 2019, to a non-secure relative placement. Against the prosecutor and law enforcement advice, the judge released him completely from probation on July 20 of 2021, just 31 days prior to this tragedy. Please keep all the victims and the community as a whole in your thoughts and prayers, but not only the victims of the August 20th event, also those who still suffer from the original traumatic events of 2018. We are here and available for questions. I have Rick Rio, the superintendent of Pawpaw Schools. I have Chief Natalie Thompson of South Haven. I have Chief Eric Marshall from Pawpaw. I have Deputy Trevor Tate, who was also part of the original hearing. And I believe that is everyone. Was on the original case. So we are available for questions.
You kind of alluded to this.
Do I understand correctly that he was supposed to be on probation until the age of 21?
No, unfortunately, when they have a juvenile probation or a juvenile sentence, the court is only able to keep them on probation until their 19th birthday, which Aiden then turned 19 earlier in August of this year.
So no other supervision, no other monitoring, nothing, your hands were tied legally after 19?
After 19, he was released.
And you alluded to this earlier, but who do you, or I guess what specific part of the system do you hold accountable, if anyone, beyond this kid himself?
Law enforcement and the prosecutor's office did everything we could. We argued our case. to the best of our ability. We presented all of the evidence that we had at the time, so the decision was not ours to make.
Is it true that when he was released from the juvenile detention facility, he was not allowed to return to Pawpaw and to stay away from Pawpaw schools?
I would probably defer to Rick Rio on that one. Or Trevor Tate. Trevor, do you want to come up here? Thank you.
At the time of the incident, he was given a no trespassing order from the sheriff's office that he was not to be on any school property. As far as him being in the Pawpaw area, I'm not sure specifically of that, but he was not allowed to be, I believe it was within 1,000 feet of any school property. Chief Marshall maybe knows about the Pawpaw area.
I don't believe there are any stipulations that he couldn't be in Pawpaw.
Has law enforcement had any contact with him since his release in November 2019? And what have those contacts been like, or even recently, even this summer? Anyone? Law enforcement contacts?
We have not had any contacts with him.
We'd have to get into our report system to check on that.
Why did he have to live in the custody of another relative versus his mother?
I don't know if he had to, I just know that's where he was placed.
Deputy Tate, you were the school liaison officer at the time at Pawpaw High School, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Did you have any concerning contact with him other than reading of that journal that you read in court?
Other than when we originally made contact with him from a teacher seeing some writings in his class that were inappropriate, and that's when he first came on the radar and we started addressing him. And then it was approximately 2 weeks later when the village police executed the search warrant at his house, and it became more relevant at that time that he certainly was a threat to the community.
And Deputy, I know his defense at the time was hammering on issues of that he was bullied and such, and you seemed hesitant to comment on that. Is that still your analyzation of the scenario?
Nope, I don't think I ever said that he was bullied, and there was nothing that we found in school to where he reported anything or that there was ever anybody that came forward to say that he was bullied. That was definitely part of their defense, but that was never determined to be the truth.
Do we know where he got the weapons in this case from Friday? Do we know where those guns came from?
Either Chief Thompson or Sheriff Abbott.
Thank you. That is still part of our ongoing investigation. The weapons were turned over to the state police, and also the FBI will be tracking where the guns came from, and that should help aid us in determining how that individual had access. So at this point, I can't answer that question, but that is something right now that is being actively investigated.
There's no indication that they were stolen.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No indication they were stolen?
I can't say either way. That's possible. We really don't have any idea right now. First of all, if the guns were registered and to who, and secondly, how he had access. And I'll just clarify the second question. There were 2 firearms. A pellet gun we consider a firearm. However, we don't believe that caused any of the injury. The 9mm handgun is the one that was shot at the scene.
Because of his, he was tried and convicted as a juvenile, was he legally able to purchase a firearm anyway?
I don't know enough of his background. I don't believe, I don't have any information as to his.
He wouldn't have been able to, if he was convicted on, he would have been banned for firearms for life.
Okay.
Do we have names of the victims yet?
And I spoke with the victims this weekend, and I spoke to them right before this press conference, and out of respect for their privacy, they urged me not to release names. However, the family did tell me that this week they will be releasing a statement to the media. So I talked to them literally minutes before this press conference. I'm really trying to give them privacy, and this is hard on everybody, but particularly for the victim's family. So they wished me today to just let you all know that they will be providing a statement on behalf of the family this week.
Is it still just a random thing with the victims?
Yes, I can affirmatively tell you that this was a random act. We have exhausted any relationship prior to the shooting in South Haven that existed between the victims and the shooter.
Can you
So this was random. Sorry.
Can you tell us about the wife's condition? I'm sorry.
Yes, and I can tell you as of today, the wife is still in critical condition.
Chief, do you know where the sawed-off rifles that he was found in possession of in 2018, where he had stolen those from?
I'm not familiar with the details of that case, so I would have to defer that question to probably the Sheriff's Department.
Prosecutor, could you tell us about the moment that you realized what was happening on Friday, or that you learned that it was this person?
I don't think I can describe that moment. My first thought was just utter sadness. And then it turned into anger. My heart just goes out to the victims. And like I said, I felt like we did everything that we could with law enforcement and as a prosecuting attorney's office to make everyone aware of this threat. I really can't even describe the thought.
You said you guys did everything you could. I mean, what needs to change so this never happens again?
I know I'm going to continue doing what I did. I know that I'm going to continue fighting whenever we have this type of, hopefully we don't see this type of case back in our courts. But if we do see it, it's really just going to, I think, empower all of us to just really fight the fight to make sure that we do everything in our power to make everyone aware of this threat so that we can prevent any future instances happening.
Does this make you want to go back and reevaluate other similar cases to see if there are people you need to perhaps keep an eye on?
I think we're always in a process of review in our office. I think we do that on a regular basis. However, this case really is a standalone case. The evidence was so overwhelming and the journal was so disturbing that I really can't even equate it to any other case, especially a juvenile, that we've even had in this office.
I guess going back reading, I was kind of unclear. Did he, back in 2018, did he come forward on his own and say what was going to happen, or did his parents find something and then he came forward?
The testimony that came out during the 2 days of hearings are that one of his relatives noticed that there was a dull saw blade in his workshop, and then confronted Aiden's mother. And then Aiden's mother did some checking and questioning, and then she was the one that ultimately brought him to the Sheriff's Department.
In that journal that Aiden kept, it mentions political extremism and extremist ideologies. Do you think that played a part in what happened on Friday?
I think that journal was so extensive, it's really hard to pinpoint it. There was so much anger in that journal, and there was so many details of so many different plans that he had in there. And there were a lot of different motives, and that's what makes it so hard and so confusing. So I can't say that it was pinpointed to any particular motive.
This question is addressed to Mr. Rick, Superintendent of Schools. Hi, Rick.
Rick, can you come over to the microphone, please?
Some of the family members did allege that Aiden had gone to school officials to complain that he was being bullied. Is that just their word against the school district's word?
So I want to start out by saying, on behalf of the school district, on behalf of our staff, on behalf of our Board of Education, our hearts go out to the families of the victims. I think that needs to be said. This is a tough time for school personnel, especially those who were heavily impacted by this incident in 2018. I was not employed by the school at that time, but I'm familiar with this case, and I came on board in Paw Paw months later after this, and I know there were some claims that Aiden was bullied as a student at Paw Paw, and from my conversations with our administrative team, I was certainly curious about that, and I think Paw Paw Schools did a very thorough job investigating those claims, because there was not evidence, as Deputy Tate said, that bullying was going on with Aiden. There's definitely some signs of problems when they discovered some drawings that he made in school, and they followed up with that appropriately. He was taken under the wing of some peer assistant leaders in school because he was new to the district and wasn't making a lot of friends. He was provided a lot of support, you know. So I think everybody surrounding him did the best they could when he was a student at Paw Paw, and you know, had some areas of concern and addressed those.
Thank you. Prosecutor, we were hearing rumors that the juvenile facility he was being kept at had requested some sort of mental health assessment before he was released, and the judge declined to do that. Is there any truth to that, or can you comment on that?
I'm actually not aware of that. I know that they did reviews every 6 months, and then they would have extensive reviews about the types of treatments that he was going through or the recommendations. So I do know that the court had the opportunity to review all of those reports every 6 months then for the hearings.
Prosecutor, you said you didn't know how to express how you felt when you heard what happened Friday. Were you surprised?
I don't know if surprised is the right word. I think we always had a fear since his original manifestos talked about bombing the school at 21. We always had a fear that there would be a future tragedy.
With that, were you aware when, or I guess law enforcement, were you aware when he was released where he was, kind of at least aware of where he was staying and what he was doing after he was released?
I'll let law enforcement answer that one. It doesn't sound like, I know when I'm deferring to the to Sheriff Abbott and to Chief Thompson, that law enforcement was notified.
And Chief Thompson, I know you guys were waiting on Friday to process the car. Was there anything else in there that was gonna hurt more people, or?
So as of today, we are still going through evidence, including items that were located in the shooter's vehicle. As of right now, I can't go into detail. I know that we have recovered quite a bit of property, and that will all be gone through later today and this week. So that information should be available at a later time. But I can tell you there was property in the suspect's vehicle that we are currently going through today.
We also discussed on Friday he might have been shouting something on the pier. Did you ever hear about anything about that?
Right, so I have not looked at all of the witness statements yet today, so I can't confirm that that's true. I have heard that mentioned, but right now I can't confirm that based on the information I have.
Chief, can you speak to at all why he was parked so far away from the pier before this happened?
You know, I can only speculate on that. At this point, I can't say if it was part of the plan, potentially, or the mere fact that the beach was very busy and the parking lot was pretty full of cars. So I can't at this point say if it was part of a plan or just there wasn't parking spaces available. But it was found actually over 2 blocks away from the beach.
Did he go anywhere before this? Did he go anywhere around South Haven before this?
Not that we have information about. His residence that we had as an address was in Bangor, Michigan. So I don't have information if he went anywhere prior to coming to South Haven that day.
Is he living at home with his mother, and have you talked to her at all?
I have not spoken with his mother. The information that we have is that he was actually living with his grandparents at the Bangor address. However, I have not spoken with his grandparents or the mother. Some of our detectives have, but he was living with grandparents in Bangor.
Do you know if we heard that they were required, since they were going to take him in, the grandparents, to remove all the guns from the house? Do you know if that's true or if that's a requirement in taking them in? Or?
You know, I don't have information pertaining to that.
You guys had asked earlier if we'd had any contact with them since 2018. They pulled all the reports that we had from 2018, and 2018 was the last time the sheriff's office had any contact with Aiden Ingalls. You ask a question where the firearms come from back in 2018. They were initially taken from his grandparents' house without their knowledge. Once it all come to fruition that night on the plan that was going to be set forth the next day, that's when the grandparents had actually figured out what had taken place with the firearms that was being taken. You would ask about what you would like to see come out with this whole case and help prevent it in the future. It's no secret mental health awareness is a big part of this case and needs to be on the forefront. You got to take out people's ages in cases like this. You got to look at the facts in cases like this, and you got to address it in cases like this. Unfortunately, what took place Friday was not a shock to a lot of us. It's a sad situation. We can only hope that this case goes nationwide, and the fact that everything comes to the forefront, law enforcement in the future, families in the future, communities in the future, don't have to deal with something like this. We can only hope and pray that this case prevents tragedies in the future.
Did Aiden go back to live with his grandparents in 2021 that were the same grandparents that he stole the guns from in 2018?
I don't know the address where he was staying at.
You know what his plan was, the shooting on the 4th of July in South Haven? What was other than shooting people, but you know what his plan was?
You want to go through on that one? Yeah, it was in the itinerary on the whole 4th of July one.
So in his journal, he spoke specifically about on the 4th of July during the fireworks that he would take firearms and explosives and kill as many people as he could. That was in 2018.
And is that when he would turn 21? Did he like give a date for when he would do that, or was that just he wanted to do that whenever? In terms of July.
The 21 was the school.
The 21-year age was a general statement. It wasn't specific. It was just the date that was given was during the fireworks of the 4th of July.
Did you mention any plans to do anything at the Bangor fireworks?
There was nothing mentioned on the Bangor fireworks.
Was that the Bangor? Is there mental health treatment wrapped into the juvenile system as it is already?
There is. And you can answer this as well, but a lot of times in the sentencings like this, that is part of the sentencing guidelines. They have to receive X amount of treatment before they can even be released, whether they're a juvenile or tried as an adult.
So if he was tried as an adult, what would have been the main difference? Would he still have control of him after he was 19? Or?
Yes, so what the guidelines would have been a broader range. We could have done a little bit more in terms of the length of probation. We could have looked at incarceration. We could have just looked at different options that would have been available to us. And yes, we would have been able to keep him under the jurisdiction until after age 19.
And prosecutor, is that a decision that ultimately comes down to the judge in terms of if the case is going to be tried as an adult or juvenile?
Yes, there's only 13 different crimes, and they're very specific types of crimes where the prosecutor has the authority to then designate the juvenile as an adult. This particular charge fell outside of those 13 crimes, so then we had to do the hearing. It's called a designation hearing for then the court to make that decision, and then the judge would make the decision on which way, whether it was going to be prosecution as an adult or prosecution as a juvenile.
Have you had a conversation with the judge in this case?
I have not.
Chief Eric Marshall with the Paw Paw Police Department. I'd just like to say on behalf of law enforcement that this same group pretty much stood with us in 2018 in the courtroom. You literally had over 200 years of law enforcement experience there, showing a judge that he was about to make the wrong decision. Nobody here has seen all the evidence. It's outstanding. how much evidence is involved in these two cases. And Judge Dufan made the wrong decision in this case. There's no denying that.
Do you remember how you, Chief, how did you, can you remember how you felt when you found out he was being tried as a juvenile back in 2018?
Yeah, I was sickened like I was on Friday, because we were part of the investigation, and along with the Sheriff's Department, State Police, working with the prosecutor's office, I saw things in this case that I haven't seen in 38 years, and I'm retired out of Kalamazoo. So I can tell you that I was even, he could have went even with a hybrid sentencing, which he chose not to do. And really, Aiden got the least amount of time incarcerated that anyone could have had. And the problem is, like it's been explained to you folks, and then there's no high intensity monitoring. If Susan had went through and we'd have been able to bound him over as an adult, my understanding is the way this scored out, he would have done a minimum of 57 months in prison. Well, so he'd still be in. So the reality is, this was one of those cases that could have been preventable, and it wasn't. Now it's up for the people of this county to decide who made the wrong decision.
Prosecutor, has your office heard from Judge Dufan at all after this has occurred?
No, I have not. He was not in the office on Friday, and I don't believe he's in today. So I have not had any conversations at all with him.
You feel like the mechanisms are in place systemically, I mean legally, the mechanisms are in place to prevent something like this or keep them longer. There's nothing legislatively that needs to happen.
No, there certainly is all different avenues in place that we can pursue, and we will continue to pursue it when it's appropriate. No, so to answer your question, I do think the avenues are there. It's just going through all that evidence and then making the right decision on what course to take.
On the mental health aspect, I mean, what needs to happen? More treatment needs to be available, more residential treatment needs to be available. I mean, does anybody want to offer anything in that regard?
I would say
specifically?
yes. As we all know, funding's been cut in a lot of different areas for mental health. And so it's certainly a big concern, not just for our community, but for all communities. And I think the more that we can do to provide those services and band together, that when we find individuals that need those services, that we do what we can to make sure that they have access to those services as well. Any other questions for anyone else?
I apologize for this, but the court case is sealed and we cannot get access to it now.
Yes.
So if anybody has some of those documents that they wish to share, we would love to see them. And actually, I don't know what he was convicted on for certain at the end. You happen to remember that off the top of your head?
Because the decision was made to allow him to be prosecuted as a juvenile, we allowed him to plea on 2 counts. So we actually had him on count 1, which was the highest charge, and that was using explosives towards a vulnerable target. And then we also had him plead guilty to the firearms, having the short-barreled shotgun. So at that point, we already knew that he was going to be prosecuted as a juvenile, so we allowed him to then plead guilty on those 2 charges, and then they proceeded from there. It would not have changed then the sentencing recommendations.
I don't remember the time in 2018, but so he was out in November 2019. Did he even do a year? I believe it's been a year now.
I'm not sure of what his actual entry date was, but I do know that he was out on November in 2019. Mm-hmm. Yep, so just maybe over a little bit.
I know you're not releasing the names of the victims, but were they local or were they from the area?
I do not know that. I know that, I know you've been communicating with him.
Right, I can tell you they were from Southwest Michigan, and again, just respecting the family's wishes. I know this week they'll be releasing a statement jointly from the family, but the couple is from Southwest Michigan, so I can say that much.
Any other questions? thank you all for being here. We appreciate your coverage of the story. We appreciate your interest and also just your attention to the details on this one. And I can't thank everyone behind me enough for being here. I think this is a tremendous show of support for our community, and the fact that we really want to try to do the very best job we can to make sure this doesn't happen again. So thank you very much, everyone.